Jessica Reynolds had always believed in the strength of her marriage. For 10 years, she and Daniel had built a life together, buying a home, raising their 8-year-old daughter, and supporting each other through life's challenges. They weren't perfect, but she had always thought they were solid, unshakable, until everything changed. It started with the small things. Daniel's late nights at work became more frequent. His phone was always on silent, and he guarded it like a classified document. When she'd ask about his day, he'd respond in vague, one-word answers. But the final straw came when she found a receipt for a luxury hotel, dated on a night he had told her he was working late. Jessica's mind raced. Could it be innocent? A client meeting? A company event? But deep down, she already knew the truth. Then came their anniversary night. She had planned the perfect evening, his favorite meal, candlelight, and a bottle of expensive wine. But when he walked through the door, he barely acknowledged the setup. Instead, he sat down, rubbed his temples, and then dropped the bombshell. "I think we should open our marriage." Jessica's stomach twisted. "Excuse me?" Daniel sighed, as if he had been carrying this burden for too long. "I've been thinking about this a lot. Monogamy isn't natural. I love you, Jess, but I don't think exclusivity is what's best for us anymore." She stared at him, searching his face for any trace of the man she had married. Where is this coming from? His eyes flickered with something. Hesitation, guilt. "I've met someone." Jessica felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. "You're already seeing her, aren't you?" Daniel didn't answer right away, which told her everything she needed to know. Jessica pushed away from the table, the romantic dinner forgotten. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "You don't want an open marriage, you want permission to cheat." Daniel exhaled sharply. "That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is you pretending this is about us when it's really just about you." She turned on her heel and walked out of the room before he could respond. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a new thought crept into her mind. "I'm not going to let him get away with this." Jessica spent the next few days playing the part of the unsuspecting wife. She acted distant, but not confrontational, careful not to raise suspicion. Meanwhile, she began collecting evidence. Her first move was to search Daniel's laptop. He had always been careless with his passwords, and within minutes, she was inside his email. What she found made her physically ill. Dozens of emails to someone named Rachel, explicit messages, plans to meet at hotels, promises of a future together, flights booked for 2, whispered dreams of a fresh start. Her hands clenched into fists. He wasn't just having an affair, he was building another life behind her back. Jessica felt a cold wave of rage wash over her. This wasn't just betrayal, this was calculated deceit. Her next step was tracking his movements. She bought a GPS tracker online, small enough to fit unnoticed under his car. That Friday, Daniel claimed he had an out-of-town work trip. Jessica didn't argue. Instead, she waited until he left, then opened an app on her phone, watching as the blinking red dot moved not toward the airport, but downtown. She followed. Jessica parked a block away from the upscale hotel, her stomach in knots. From the front seat of her car, she watched as Daniel emerged from his vehicle. A woman was already waiting for him at the entrance. Slender, blonde, younger than Jessica. The way she clung to him, kissed him like she belonged to him. It was all the confirmation Jessica needed. But she wasn't done yet. Instead of storming into the hotel, Jessica reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and took a series of pictures. Then she hit record as Daniel wrapped his arms around Rachel and whispered something in her ear. Rachel giggled and held onto his arm as they walked inside. Jessica's lips curled into a smirk. Gotcha. That night, she didn't go home. She booked a room in the same hotel, on the same floor. If Daniel wanted to play this game, she would play it better. She waited in the hallway near their suite, phone in hand, camera ready. At exactly 10:32 p.m., the door to room 815 opened, and Daniel stepped out in a robe. Rachel followed, wearing nothing but a silk slip. They were laughing, completely unaware of Jessica watching from the shadows. Click, click, click. Jessica captured every moment, every touch, every smile, every proof she needed to end him. Then she turned on her heel and walked away. The next morning, she met her best friend and divorce attorney, Laura, at a cafe. Jessica slid the phone across the table. "I need you to start the paperwork." Laura scrolled through the images and let out a low whistle. "Damn, Jess, you really got him." Jessica's expression was cold. "I'm not just divorcing him." Laura arched a brow. "Oh?" Jessica leaned in. "I'm going to destroy him." Laura grinned. "Now that's the Jessica I know." For the next few days, Jessica worked tirelessly. She transferred half of their savings into an account under her name. She documented every suspicious withdrawal Daniel had made in the past 6 months. She gathered proof of his infidelity and stored everything in multiple secure locations. Then she made one final move. She sent an anonymous email to Rachel's employer. Attached were the hotel receipts, the photos, and the timestamps. She sat back and waited. The next day, Daniel came home pale, his phone gripped tightly in his hand. "Jessica," he said, his voice shaking. "Something's happened." She took a sip of her wine. "Oh? Rachel, she got fired today." Jessica feigned surprise. "Oh no, what happened?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Someone sent her boss pictures." Jessica tilted her head. "Pictures? Of what?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Of us. At the hotel." Jessica held back a smirk. "And so it begins." "Wow," she said, setting her glass down. "That's awful." Daniel looked at her, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Jessica met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Daniel," she said smoothly, "why would I waste my time on something like that?" For the first time in their marriage, Daniel had no idea who he was dealing with, and Jessica wasn't done yet. Laura had warned her that simply catching Daniel cheating wouldn't be enough. She needed leverage, financial records, proof of infidelity, and most importantly, a way to humiliate him on her terms. She spent the next few days quietly gathering everything she needed: bank statements, text logs, even conversations Daniel had with Rachel, where he discussed how he was going to break it to Jessica soon. But Jessica didn't just want revenge, she wanted justice. On Friday evening, she sat on the couch, sipping wine, as she waited for Daniel to return from his work trip. When he walked through the door, she gave him a small smile. "How was your trip?" she asked sweetly. Daniel looked momentarily thrown off, but then quickly recovered. "Exhausting. Long meetings. I'm starving." Jessica nodded. "Good thing I made reservations." He frowned. "Reservations?" "Yes, a celebration. You'll see." Daniel hesitated, but then shrugged. "Sure, I could use a good meal." Jessica smirked to herself. "You have no idea." She had chosen an upscale steakhouse, one of Daniel's favorite places, ensuring the perfect stage for what was to come. But the real masterpiece, the guest list. As they arrived at the private dining room, Daniel froze. Seated at the table were 3 unexpected guests. 1, Rachel's husband, who looked like he was barely containing his rage. 2, Daniel's boss, who had no idea why he'd been invited. 3, Laura, calmly sipping wine, divorce papers neatly stacked in front of her. Jessica turned to Daniel, her smile sharp as glass. "I thought it was time we all had an honest conversation." Daniel's face drained of color. "Jess, what the hell is this?" Rachel's husband slammed his fist on the table. "That's what I'd like to know." He turned to Daniel, his voice venomous. "How long have you been screwing my wife?" Daniel opened his mouth, but Jessica cut in. "Oh, don't bother lying. We have proof." She pulled out a folder filled with screenshots, emails, hotel receipts, photos, everything. She slid it across the table. Daniel's boss, a stern-looking man in his 50s, picked up a document, and his eyes widened. "Daniel, is this real?" Jessica leaned in, lowering her voice, just enough to send a chill down his spine. "You told Rachel you were leaving me next week. You told your boss you were on a business trip. You told me you loved me." She tilted her head. "How many lies do you think you can keep straight?" Rachel's husband turned to Jessica, his face twisted with betrayal. "When did you find out?" Jessica smiled. "About a week ago, but I wanted to be thorough." Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "Jessica, this is insane. You ambushed me." Jessica sipped her wine, completely unfazed. "Oh, honey, you ambushed our marriage the moment you stepped into that hotel with her." Daniel's boss exhaled sharply and stood. "Daniel, consider this your resignation. I don't need this kind of scandal in my company." Rachel's husband stood next, his face twisted with disgust. "I hope you two ruin each other." He turned to Jessica. "Thank you for this." Jessica inclined her head. "My pleasure." As he stormed out, Laura slid the divorce papers forward. "Sign these, Daniel, or this gets much worse." Daniel, still in shock, looked at Jessica, searching for any sign of mercy. "Jess, please." Jessica drove home that night, feeling the weight of the last few weeks finally lift from her shoulders. But she knew her battle wasn't over yet. The next morning, she sat in Laura's office, going over the legal process. "What's next?" she asked, sipping her coffee. Laura flipped through the documents. "Daniel signed the divorce papers, but we need to make sure he follows through. We're pushing for full custody of your daughter, financial compensation, and we'll be freezing your joint accounts." Jessica nodded. "Do it." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. News of Daniel's downfall spread quickly. His career was in ruins. Rachel left him to salvage her own reputation, and he was forced to move out of their home with nothing but a suitcase. Jessica, on the other hand, flourished. She finalized the divorce, gained full custody of their daughter, and even treated herself to a long overdue vacation. Then, one evening, her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. Jessica debated ignoring it, but decided to answer. "What?" His voice was quiet. "Jess, I messed up. I lost everything." Jessica took a slow breath. "Yes, you did." He hesitated. I'm sorry." For the first time in weeks, Jessica smiled. Not because she forgave him, but because she had won. "Goodbye, Daniel." She ended the call, tossed her phone onto the couch, and poured herself a glass of wine. She had taken back her power. Jessica leaned back on her couch, swirling the wine in her glass, relishing the quiet victory. But even as she basked in the triumph of reclaiming her life, she knew she wasn't done. Winning wasn't just about divorcing Daniel. It was about ensuring she and her daughter had the best future possible, free from the shadows of his betrayal. The next morning, she met Laura at the courthouse to finalize the remaining legalities. The fight for full custody had been easier than expected. Daniel, now unemployed and disgraced, had no real means to contest it. The judge granted Jessica sole custody, with Daniel allowed only supervised visitation. As they exited the courthouse, Laura turned to her. "So, what's next for you?" Jessica exhaled, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. "A fresh start," she said simply. "I've spent too much time cleaning up his mess. Now it's time to build something for myself." That night, she opened her laptop and began searching for a new job. Not out of necessity. Thanks to the financial settlement, she was secure. But because she refused to let her past define her. She had put her dreams on hold for Daniel's career. Now it was her turn. Just as she was about to close her laptop, a notification popped up, an email from an anonymous sender. Subject: "You should know the truth about Daniel." Jessica hesitated, then clicked. Attached was a document detailing financial records, ones she hadn't seen before. Hidden accounts, secret transactions, money transferred offshore. Her pulse quickened. Daniel had been siphoning money away for months, possibly even years. She immediately called Laura. "We're not done," she said, her voice hard. "Daniel's been hiding money." Laura let out a low whistle. "I'll get my forensic accountant on it. If this is real, he's in serious trouble." Jessica smirked. "Oh, I'm counting on it." 2 weeks later, Jessica sat in a courtroom again, this time not for divorce, but for financial fraud charges against Daniel. The evidence Laura's team had uncovered was damning. Daniel had been laundering money through dummy companies, evading taxes, and attempting to hide assets during their divorce. As the judge read the charges, Daniel slumped in his chair, defeated. Jessica watched, impassive. She had given him chances. He had chosen greed over integrity. Now he would pay the price. When the verdict came, Daniel was ordered to pay hefty fines, and a criminal investigation was opened against him. Rachel, who had once believed she would have a perfect future with him, had vanished without a trace. As Jessica left the courthouse, she felt something she hadn't in years: peace. A year later, Jessica stood at the edge of her new home's porch, watching her daughter play in the yard. She had rebuilt everything: her confidence, her happiness, her life. Laura sat beside her, raising a glass of wine. To fresh starts, Jessica clinked her glass, to never settling for less. She had been broken, betrayed, and humiliated. But in the end, she had won. And this time, no one would ever take her power away again. Never underestimate the power of the betrayed. Jessica didn't break down. She fought back with intelligence and patience, turning pain into a weapon. Cheaters may think they've won, but the truth always exposes them. Control your finances, control your life. Jessica didn't just win custody. She uncovered Daniel's deceit, leaving him with no escape. Money can be hidden, but the truth cannot. Evidence is power. Words can be denied, but hard proof cannot be ignored. Jessica collected every piece of betrayal and used it to take him down. Self-respect is more important than blind forgiveness. She didn't beg, she didn't plead. She chose freedom, rebuilt her life, and reclaimed her power. If you enjoy deep, emotional, and meaningful stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new update. Your support is the motivation that drives us to keep bringing you powerful stories. Once again, thank you for being here, and see you in the next story.